Hello, everybody. What's going on? Welcome to the June 30th edition of the Go With The Flow NHL podcast. As always, I'm joined by my line mates, Dan Morantz and Kevin Bartman. Fellas, what's going on?
How's it going, everybody?
What's up, boys?
And for our American listeners at home, extending our, happy 4th of July to everybody. We're looking forward to the week ahead. Obviously, July 1st, free agency, and some exciting NHL news has happened since we all got together last Thursday night and dropped the episode for last Friday. And, later that Friday night, we had the first ever Vegas Golden Knights roster unveiling with their expansion draft. So we just jumped right into it, boys. Initial thoughts on the expansion draft, the corniness of the NHL awards. That was pretty brutal how funny they try to be. But, the NHL awards, obviously, didn't really think there was a lot of surprises there with the nominations. But just initial thoughts on the Vegas rosters.
I think just initial thoughts is just looking at the roster. I don't think they're going to be very good next year. They do have a couple of impact players. They got David Perron, who's pretty solid, got it from St. Louis, and this guy from Florida. How do you say his last name? Marchessault?
Yep.
Yeah, like this guy kind of came out of nowhere. Like not until like maybe 2 weeks before the expansion draft. I feel like he was really under the radar, and then everyone starts seeing his name. He's 30-goal scorer, and then makes you think what was Florida thinking on not leaving him protected. So that's a pretty good pickup by Vegas. And then it was really interesting to see all the moves they made on draft night, especially. They were just flipping players for draft picks left and right. So in that respect, they're set up pretty nicely for the long term because they have I think next year alone, they have 11 first and second round draft picks.
Dude, their 2020 draft's going to be lit. You see, I don't know. It's like the NBA. I don't know what's going on. They keep acquiring these 2020 picks.
Yeah, but it's kind of a conflict of interest though, because they're going to be good down the road. But I feel like if they underperform severely this year, that could look very bad for Gary Bettman and just for the NHL, because this is kind of a sort of a reach experiment. Yeah, it's a good word in such an unknown market like Las Vegas. So it'll be interesting to see if they do have a down year or just a really a really poor season, if the fans, how they respond, if they keep coming out to games next year, or if they sort of give up on the franchise.
Yeah. Looking at their goaltending, I think their goaltending is fairly solid. I feel like Fleury had a revitalization, I guess we could say, in his career. Every year that Pittsburgh has gone into the playoffs with Fleury in the net, I've always just kind of been like, yeah, but it's Fleury. He's not that good. And then Murray came along last year, and then this year Murray got hurt, and Fleury had to step up to the plate, and he definitely did. So if he can keep doing that for Vegas, that should put them in a pretty solid position. And I think their defense is pretty solid as well with Emelin, and I think Derek Anglin's pretty good. Jason Garrison's got a absolute rocket from the blue line. Who else do they have?
Shea Theodore. Theodore is the real prize.
Yeah, Shea Theodore, obviously, like you just said. And then Clayton Stoner, he's not afraid to mix it up, hit hard, block shots, do all that kind of stuff. And then you're looking at their, forwards like we were saying, they've got some decent players. James Neal and David Perron and Marchessault. Those three, I would look to them as the main scoring threats. Neal being the main one of those, probably. Although, like we said, Marchessault is pretty damn good too. And then there's a lot of more supporting cast type players like Eric Howla, Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, guys like that. So, they could be good. It depends on, it depends on a lot of things. Obviously, it also depends on the kind of seasons that other teams have, like the Kings, for instance, with a new coaching staff and some changes made there. But I'm going to say I would expect them to be somewhere around the middle of the road. I don't think that they're just going to be absolute garbage, but Kevin, like you were saying, it really is an experiment, especially when you had a city in Quebec just dying, it seems, screaming for to have an NHL team come back to their hometown, and instead Bettman puts it in Vegas, which is kind of like, what?
Yeah.
So it definitely will be an experiment. It's definitely a risk that Bettman took. I'm excited for it one way or the other, pass or fail. I'm kind of excited for it. It's just nice to see a new, fresh sort of face in the Western Conference. But yeah, I agree with you, Kevin. It really is an experiment, and the draft picks are really what's going to have to bail them out. Come the next couple of years, which they look like they're set up pretty well to do so, to take advantage.
Yeah, next year's draft class is supposed to be pretty stacked too. So with having those 11 first and second round picks, they should be set up, or they are set up pretty nicely. But they should definitely see a big bump in performance. I will say that Vegas has a pretty high probability of starting off 1-0. They play Arizona.
Very true.
Yeah, that's very, very possible. I think. Well, first of all, yeah, I think that their game plan here is pretty clear. They're trying to hoard a bunch of draft picks, and I think it's a little hard. It's a little early right now to judge how the Knights are going to do this year, because I think we're still yet to see a few moves be made. There's definitely some guys that are going to get flipped, if not, in the next couple days. Somewhere around the trade deadline. I mean, I'm looking at a guy like James Neal. I think I have a hard time believing that guy's got one more big contract left in his career. I have a hard time seeing him signing in Vegas, long term, with, how they're going to be a few years away, and how used to competing he's been in recent years with Pittsburgh and Nashville. I think that's a guy that wants to get paid and win, and there's a team that'll probably accommodate a guy like that. So we saw it with Mark Mathot the other night, getting traded to Dallas for, a goalie and a draft pick. So in the second round in 2020, I believe. So, that's what happens. I mean, you ice 23, 24 guys a night, and they got 30 picks. And then they also have a few guys, who knows what happens with Cody Glass. He might go back to junior. The guy that's often forgotten about is Vadim Shipshayev, who they signed for over $4 million a year out of Russia. He was on the KHL's highest scoring line.
Wait,
so, I mean,
Nick, hang on. I think Kevin, did that cut out for you?
What part?
Like the last 3 or 4 sentences Nick said.
No, I heard him.
Okay, I screwed that up. I'm sorry. That happened entirely on my end. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you, so I thought something happened with you. I apologize.
All right. Where are we at?
All right. Well, Dan fucked that one up. We're at 8 minutes even.
All right, I'll just restart that whole thing.
I apologize. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. All right. I'm just going to restart, and I'll consolidate it. All right, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, I think Vegas's game plan here is pretty clear. They're trying to hoard picks. As you saw the other night, they got another second-round draft pick by flipping Mark Mathot, who they drafted from Ottawa. They trade him to Dallas for a second-rounder in 2020 and get another prospect in the form of a goalie that Dallas had selected, in the 7th round of the draft. So, that's what happens, in an expansion draft. They had 30 selections to make. You ice a 23, 24-man roster. So naturally, there's going to be, some extra spots for guys, and I think some of those picks might wind up, playing in the AHL right away. They're not going to be up with the national roster right away, but naturally, they're just going to have to flip a couple guys. And, there's also some spots being taken up by guys like Vadim Shipshayev, who's on the KHL's highest scoring line last season, who signed a free agent deal with them. But I think it's just hard to project how they're going to do. I have a hard time seeing them burying a lot of pucks. They drafted a lot of defensemen that, to me, they seem like they're kind of just on the wrong side of 30. Guys like Stoner, England, who's a Vegas native, and Garrison. These are all guys who have at some points in their career been, good defensemen, but they're just expendable guys north of 30. I think Theodore on the back end there is easily their biggest prize. And as far as like future moves and seeing how they're going to do, I mean, I feel like a guy like James Neal, like you're looking at him like as one of the main guys that could probably bury a few pucks for them. But, you know, that's a guy he's played for Pittsburgh and Nashville now the past few seasons. And that's a guy that, you know, he's got one more big contract left and the guy likes to win. I just have a hard time seeing him being in Vegas past this year. He's got 1 year left on his deal. That's a guy that where, you know, if the plan's to hoard assets, I mean, that guy will easily fetch a first-round pick, if not more, at the trade deadline. So I just feel like when Vegas falls out of it, you know, they're going to make a few more trades in the next coming days, and they're going to be able to flip some assets at the trade deadline, and they're just going to continue to hoard picks. And I think, like Kevin said, it's kind of they're kind of between a rock and a hard place because, you know, the way to, you know, to build a roster is you want to, you know, you want to draft and develop your own players and guys that fit the system, but, you know, you got to make 30 picks and you got to mix around, you know, saving up for the future as well as making sure the team's respectable once the honeymoon of landing a team is gone, you know, a place like Winnipeg where they haven't really done a whole hell of a lot lately, you know, they're still in a Canadian market, so they're going to draw really well. And Edmonton still drawed really well, even though they missed the playoffs 11 straight years. For Vegas, you know, if they're not doing well, they're going to be really they're going to be very reliant on the out-of-town fans coming in, you know, oh, I got to go see my team in Vegas. This is sick. Like, they're going to be relying on that kind of stuff, and that's not really a good formula. So I like what they're doing as far as building toward the future, but, yeah, I just don't see them doing too hot next year. Just not a lot of guys for me that can bury the puck. Not a lot of exciting defensemen outside of Theodore, who's going to have potentially a lot of responsibility early on, but maybe that's good for his development. And, you know, they're facing the franchise Fleury's also on the wrong side of 30. So there's going to be a lot of activity with Vegas in the coming weeks and days and, you know, trade deadline in the coming years. So they're just going to have a ton of moves and they just have a ton of assets. So they're a team to watch out for in a couple of years, but I don't think so right now.
Yeah, and that's a good point you bring up too with the fans and everything. You know, obviously, well, me personally, obviously, I didn't know you guys when the Hawks were utter crap, but I still went to Hawks games when they were crappy. I remember watching when Crawford first came in the league. Jeremy Roenick was still around, not on the Hawks, but he was still playing in the NHL. And there was just nobody in the stands, but that's because the Hawks have been around, you know, forever. They're an original six team. This is, you know, team number 31 coming into the league. And so, Nick, like you said, I think it's a really good point. If they struggle, Vegas is just going to keep operating like Vegas does, as if there's no hockey team there. And they're going to be heavily reliant on the out-of-town fans. And like you said, that's just not a good formula. Is if you're packing, you know, T-Mobile Arena with a bunch of Hawks fans instead of Vegas Golden Knight fans, you know, that can be really scary for a brand new franchise.
And the Raiders are moving there, so I mean,
yeah,
they're already going to be second fiddle.
Yeah, they're already going to get some competition. Yeah, and they probably will be second fiddle. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying 100% on those.
Also, I feel like if it gets to that point where they're relying on away fans to fill the seats, I feel like they'll start to treat hockey games as just sort of like a thing to do before you hit the casino in Vegas. It's like, oh, let's go to a hockey game, get fucked up, and go to the casinos.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, that's just.
It's almost like.
Yeah.
It would become a mockery, which is just like absolutely the worst thing that Gary Bettman could imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's the non-traditional hockey market thing. I mean, you got to give fans a reason to want to pick going to a hockey game over all the other entertainment and the drinking and the gambling that's, you know, right around the corner on the strip. You have to give fans a reason to want to be there, and that reason is winning. So, yes, well, I think we all agree, you know, you got to hoard assets to be good. They're going to need these guys to develop quickly and make some savvy moves along the way, and hopefully for their sake, they become a good, you know, like free agent destination, because I think the honeymoon after about 2 years is probably going to end, and that's where you're going to go, well, now it's where we need winning to start happening, and we need winning, and we still need these visiting fans to come because, with the big hockey markets and just generally large, sporting markets out there, fans are going to come regardless. In Vegas, I mean, there's so many different things they could be second fiddle to. And this is the first time they've had a professional sports franchise there, so they've got that going for them. But pretty soon the Raiders are going to be moving in and stuff, so it's going to be really important for them to get going here quickly. But any thoughts on the oh shit, never mind. We talked about the jerseys, didn't we, last week? Fuck.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. What time we at cut that?
We're at 14 minutes 56 seconds.
All right, I blew that. Okay. Do we have any other thoughts on the Vegas roster?
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'll say something. All right. 3, 2, 1. Yeah. So, fuck.
Jesus.
Good. It's a good thing I didn't hit start on the clock. We're still right at 14 minutes, almost 15.
I'm trying to think what we're supposed to talk about next.
Are we just segueing into the actual draft and then the Hawks stuff? Or?
I think trades. Yeah. Speaking of trading one thing for another, how about no? All right. Let's talk about. I'll just say something. All right. 3, 2, 1. Yeah. So moving along, after the expansion draft, boys, there were a few, trades on draft Friday. I happen to be in attendance for the 2017 NHL draft. Is in our hometown of Chicago. Unfortunately, draft night, there weren't a whole hell of a lot of fireworks until at the very end of the draft where St. Louis moved, some picks to Philly, including their first rounder to get Braden Shen. And then toward the very end, Pittsburgh traded down 20 spots from 31 to 51 and got Ryan Reeves. But earlier in the day, I think, is where the fireworks really happened. They happened a few hours before the draft starts with, I hate to talk about them because everybody by now knows we're big Hawks guys, but I mean, that was a crazy, what was that, boys? 10 minutes, you trade, you trade Nicholas Hjalmarsson to Arizona, and then they traded Panarin for the, the return of Brandon Saad. And this comes on the heels of, we had talked about it last week, Marian Hossa is going to miss the 2018 season. This is possibly it for him. He might have to hang up the skates because of his skin disorder. So the Blackhawks, boys, they have a new identity. Hossa is gone. Panarin's gone. Hjalmarsson's gone. In come Connor Murphy. Brandon Saad's return. And, they got a few extra bucks now to work with, so possibly a free agent here or something. There's been some talk about maybe a guy like Sam Gagner. That's Kevin's boy, but just initial thoughts. all right. But initial thoughts on the Blackhawks, and then maybe we can talk about the draft night trades a little bit.
Yeah. So I'll start with Saad. I think overall, I was pretty okay with everything. As far as Saad goes, I'm 1,000% okay with this. I was devastated when Saad, I still remember working at Total Hockey, and it popped up on the screen at NHL Network, and I was looking at my coworker. We thought it was like a joke or something. We were really, pissed off that we couldn't get him. So now that we've got him back, that's really exciting. And yes, I know we're losing Panarin, but as we've discussed, we're getting a player that's a little bit bigger, maybe slightly less skill, but still has tremendous offensive talent, a better two-way player, and a guy that's proven to be extremely lethal and extremely successful come playoff time, and Panarin really hasn't. And he's younger than Panarin, oddly enough. And we won't have to worry about his contract in 4 years, whereas Panarin's we would have had to worry about 2 seasons from now. So I guess, yes, technically it's a lateral move, but at the same time, we're getting somebody that we're very familiar with. He's got really good chemistry with Taves, and I think that's something that they're trying to reinvigorate. Sacrifice Kane's kind of right-hand man, but I think Kane's going to be fine with no matter who he plays with. So overall there, I'm okay with everything there. Yes, we did lose Tyler Mott, but with the young talent that the Hawks have been bringing in from the AHL, I don't know if Mott necessarily would have fit anywhere with Hartman, Panic, Schmaltz, Sinistroza, all those young guys that we know and love, and Mott was so up and down between the AHL and the NHL. That doesn't really make me sad. What's the goalie's name? Forsling?
Forsberg, Anton Forsberg.
Forsberg. I'm sorry, Forsberg. I've heard he's pretty decent. I don't know too much about him, but obviously I'd love to see him in action, and it's good that we've got a solid backup goalie after losing Antti Ranta a couple seasons ago and Darling this year. It's good to see an actual backup to Crawford. As far as Jarmelson goes, I was really devastated because Hammer's been one of my favorite guys.
I said he wasn't going to get traded. I was so wrong on that. I mean, I've never been more wrong. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, and I thought Seabrook would have been somehow the one to go just because of his massive contract that he has. I think we've got a good young defenseman in Murphy. So, at the end of the day, I think we're doing okay. Like you said, the identity's changed, and with Hossa being out, thoughts and prayers to him with the crap that he's dealing with, because that totally blows. But I think overall, at the end of the day, I think both moves were fine. The one that's the killer is Hossa being out, because you could have had, Hossa play with like Saad and Taves or something like that, because he's out. But overall, as far as the trades go, I think they're pretty solid. I'm okay with them.
Yeah, I'm actually okay with both of them too. I think if this thing with Hossa doesn't happen, we still have Panarin. Because this trade wasn't, it obviously wasn't a swap to, to keep your offensive production. You got to fill. That's a big hole that Hossa leaves. He has such a physical presence, and he's such a great two-way player. And I think you're getting a younger version. Wow, not a pretty version of that. I got to start over. Fuck.
I was really hoping you would escape out of that.
Oh, I couldn't. I couldn't.
Time. Sorry. Blah, blah, blah. 20 minutes, 46 seconds.
All right, good. Oof. A pretty version of Marian Hossa.
Marcel Hossa. That's what it is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Hit it, Kev.
All right. How did I start it? What did I say? All right. Yeah.
You're talking about how you don't think it happens if Hossa's not. If Hossa's here, you don't think we have Saad, which I disagree with. But I'm going to go next. I disagree with that, but you go. You give your shit, and then we'll go.
All right.
Give your shit.
3, 2, 1. Yeah, I'm actually very much okay with both these moves that were made. I think personally that if this thing with Hossa doesn't happen, I feel like Stan is less inclined to make a move, such as he did with Panarin for Saad. I think because Hossa leaves, that's such a big hole that you have in the lineup now without Hossa. He has such a physical presence. He's such a smart hockey player. He gels really nicely on that top line with Taves, and to lose that, it's obviously gonna change things a bit. So when you bring in a guy like Saad, who like Dan said, he has chemistry with the team, with Taves in particular, I think you're really making up for some of that loss, certainly. And I think the biggest concern with just the general with the average Hawks fan is that you're losing that chemistry that Kane and Panarin had. But in my opinion, I feel like, when the money's on the table, he just didn't show up in the playoffs. You really got to have your guys, especially, your best line on that second line that you have. They just didn't show up in the playoffs, and you really have to elevate your game. And we just didn't see that. And with Saad, we've seen in the past that he can play in the playoffs, being on 2 cup-winning teams. So for that deal, I think it was necessary, especially just because of the loss of Hossa. And then the other deal, it's obviously tough losing a guy like Hjalmarsson, who's been here for 10 years. and arguably one of the best, if not the best, defensive defenseman in the entire National Hockey League. So to lose that, it's pretty big. But I think the main point that Stan wanted to cover in doing this is just having cap flexibility and stability for the coming years. I think Murphy is on we have him for 5 more years at just like,
I believe it's 5. Yep.
For, I think it's $3.85 million a year. That's a little bit less than what Hjalmarsson was making, but to have him for 5 years is pretty huge. It really allows Stan to sort of plan for the future and have a better idea of what his roster is going to look like going into the offseason for the coming years. And, from what he said, he seems to be pretty high on Connor Murphy. He scouted him. He was the captain at the World Championships, his most recent World Championships. And he said he sort of fits the mold of the modern defenseman. And we also saw he touched on that in the draft with Henry Yoki Haru. So, I just think overall it does suck losing Hjalmarsson, but it's nice to see Stan sort of address the big concern of defense that we've seen, especially last year with Seabrook on the decline and Kempany not performing well. And we saw him sign Jan Rutta. So things should be looking up from here. So I do like both these moves that he made.
Of course, I'm going to give my spiel on the Blackhawks, but I'm going to actually start first with the Coyotes. I'm kind of confused at what their direction is right now. It kind of like reeks of desperation. They get Hjalmarsson in that trade. You get up a young guy who's signed like Murphy, and obviously Hjalmarsson's got value, and his talent is recognized across the league. But you also give up, the 7th overall pick and D'Angelo for a guy like Derek Stepan. I mean, like Derek Stepan's good, and Nicholas Hjalmarsson obviously are fantastic, but I feel like that team is so far off. And they also traded Mike Smith. So I mean, Arizona has just been incredibly active, but I'm looking at that team and I'm going, well, who are they going to beat out in that division? I mean, for all the struggles they've had, they're still not as good as the Kings. They're still not as good as San Jose. They're obviously not as good as Edmonton. If Mike Smith, who they just traded to Calgary, plays pretty well. I mean, he's 35, but if he plays well, they're not better than Calgary. And, Calgary also picks up Hamonic. So, you got, Travis Hamonic and, that defense, and then they have that young forward crew. I don't know what Arizona is doing. They were moves for the short term by getting guys like Stepan and Hjalmarsson, but in the short term, they're not really going to win anything. So just to start, I don't understand what a team like Arizona is doing, giving away the 7th overall pick and their top prospect, D'Angelo. I don't understand that, but I'm not going to freak out because I'm not a Coyotes fan, but it's just really weird how they shipped out some valuable assets and then brought some in, but they still really didn't. They're probably better than what they were, but I still don't think they're nearly as good. They're not nearly good enough to be a playoff team. But moving on to the Blackhawks, I think Dan said it really well. You get a guy like Brandon Saad, who I believe it was his age 20, and you're 20. Fuck. Hold on, I'm gonna restart.
Oh, okay. Well, that doesn't okay.
All right, 3, 2, 1. I think I really like these moves for the Blackhawks, though. Fuck, I can't restart again. 3, 2, 1. I actually think the first trade I'll cover that I really like is the Panarin for Saad trade, and I'm not gonna bash Panarin. Now that he's gone, I think he's fantastic. Wingman for Kane. That guy, they were great line mates together, and they tore it up in the regular season. But unfortunately, that's really the only place they tore it up together. And Dan, you had mentioned it. Saad and Taves had great chemistry and played together really well. When it counted in the playoffs, and to go against Kevin's point here, I think if they have Hossa, they still get Saad because for those that remember the Saad, Taves, and Hossa line in the 2015 Cup run was absolutely phenomenal. So that was a two-way line that did great on both sides of the ice. So I think even with Hossa still on board, with the fact that Panarin and Saad have equal cap hits, I still think they probably swing that deal. I think they just wanted to make a move that was going to make them tougher to play against in the playoffs, and it gave them speed. It made them younger. It gave them more cap flexibility for the future. So, I appreciate what the bread man did, but I'm so excited to have Brandon Saad back. I mean, when we won the 2 cups, he was 20 in 2013 and 22 in 2015. So you get Brandon Saad back at 24, and he just played for Team North America in the fall. And I mean, he's such a young guy. It's hard to believe because he came up so early, but having a guy like that who we haven't even seen the best hockey from yet, let alone from his time with the Blackhawks. I mean, this guy's entering the prime of his career, and that's going to be a fun sight to see. So I'm excited to see Taves' game hopefully elevated. And the funny thing now is for, Jonathan Taves haters out there is if he kind of has a renaissance season offensively and steps up in the playoffs, it's not going to be because he's playing well and he, trained hard in the offseason and all that. It's going to be because, the Blackhawks got Saad back. So Taves won't get any credit for any kind of a turnaround he has next year, unfortunately, which, I think most Hawk fans fully expect and are going to want from a guy that you need to win the Stanley Cup and for a guy that makes $10.5 million a year. And then going on to the Hjalmarsson trade, I think, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was going to be a free agent in 2 years?
2 years, yeah.
2 years. So that's another thing where you get Murphy for another 5, and I think Murphy's a little quicker. I think Murphy plays with a little more of an edge. I mean, pretty much any defenseman has more offensive upside than Hjalmarsson. I mean, I love the guy. He was an absolute rock for us. I mean, the guy would just eat pucks. He was an integral part of the penalty kill. I should also make a mention that Saad was huge for the Blackhawks on the penalty kill in their 2 cups. So that's a dimension that Saad brings that Panarin doesn't. So, losing Hjalmarsson stinks. The guy's a warrior. I mean, you love the guy, but it's hard to blame the Hawks for looking ahead. And that's something that Edmonton might have to – we'll talk about that later, but that's something that Edmonton might have to start doing because the rumors about Connor McDavid's next contract are just absolutely crazy about the kind – I mean, he deserves all the money he's asking for or that they're expecting him to get or whatever the case is. But, that's pretty wild. But, I think with going back to the Panarin thing, I think he's going to elevate Taves. I think it's just important that the Blackhawks address, Panarin's replacement. I think Kevin, you make a good point of also though of Saad kind of replaces Hossa more so than he replaces Panarin. I think it's just important for the Hawks to try, whether it's a veteran or it's a young guy maybe they bring up at some point in the season like a DeBrincat. I don't know what it's going to be, but they need to make sure they try to get somebody who can develop some chemistry with Kane because you can't just play Kane with anybody. You got to try to elevate his game too as much as possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. Going back to what I was talking about with the Saad trade, I feel like, to phrase it better, if Stan had any doubts about pulling the trigger on the Saad Panarin swap, the Hossa injury might have, gotten rid of any of those doubts. I guess that's a better way to phrase it. Yeah,
I mean, I think that's for sure. I mean, you need a guy that can score, and you see the value a lot of these guys have around the league now. Your Bergerons, your Kesslers, these guys that, and obviously Hossa never got his. I think a lot of people knew he was great defensively, but he never got recognized with a Selke or anything like that. But you need guys that you need some 200-foot players on a team to win, and I think Saad gives the Hawks another dimension. They got him and Taves who each play 200 feet. They're probably going to play on the same line together. So, that's huge. And any guy that you have that can also play well on the penalty kill is huge too, because I think we fully expect the Hawks to be trading Marcus Kruger here soon. He's got $2 million due to him on July 1st. So sounds like the Hawks have a deal of some sorts in place, but they got to pay the $2 million, and then the team's going to take them where they owe him $2 million less. So the Hawks are going to pay him $2 million then trade him is kind of the rumor floating around out there. But so other trades I touched on the Stepan trade. He goes from New York, where he spent many years, and then goes to Arizona. Braden Shen goes out west to the Blues from Philly. Ryan Reeves goes to Pittsburgh, and Mike Smith to Calgary. I think I pretty much got them all, other than the Blackhawk trades are kind of the biggest ones. But, any thoughts on any of the other trades that went down or just draft night in general, boys?
For the Braden Shen and Yori Laterra trade, that was kind of shocking just in the sense that I feel like it really got either team nowhere. I feel like it was sort of a really lateral move on either side.
Dan, you with us?
Yeah, sorry. Hang on. My internet went out. That was weird. I couldn't hear Kevin for a lot of that. Fucking A. I don't know what's going on.
Can you hear now?
Hang on. Yeah, I can hear you guys now. Hang on. I stopped it at 33.5 minutes.
You talked about Jalmerson Panarin, right? Yeah, you did. You got your thoughts in.
Yeah, I talked about the Hawks. What were the other trades that we were thinking about?
Kevin just brought up the Shen trade, if you want to comment on that. He said it was a lateral move. Then there was also Mike Smith, the Derek Stepan.
Oh yeah, I'll talk about Smith. Who did Phoenix get for Smith again?
Kevin.
Fuck, I don't know.
I think it was a bunch of shit.
Okay. Yeah.
I can talk about Smith going up too. And is Elliott? Oh my God, where's Elliott? Is he?
He hasn't signed yet.
He hasn't signed.
I thought they said he was.
He's Philly bound, supposedly.
Yeah, Philly.
The early rumor is he's gone. Well, because you can negotiate, but you're supposed to not be able to talk term. But
yeah,
it already leaked. He's going to get almost $3 million. So do you have any thoughts on Shen for Laterra?
No, not really. Just because I don't know enough about Laterra. Actually, I don't really know enough about either one of them to really.
Well, you could just jump in and just go. I feel like I had some thoughts on the Mike Smith trade. You could literally just not answer it.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Go 1 sec here. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, and then you've got Brian Elliott and Mike Smith, the possible shit. I fucked that up. I was thinking of a way to escape from it because I knew once I said Brian Elliott, I was like, that's not right.
Just say I agree. Just be like I agree, and I thought the Mike Smith trade, whatever your thoughts are, if it's good for Calgary or whatever.
Okay.
Or you could maybe you could talk about why did they go for Mike Smith instead of Fleury? I don't know. Say something like that. That's interesting.
Okay. Yeah, that works. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, I agree. And then you've got Mike Smith heading up to Calgary, which is really interesting, especially considering Brian Elliott hasn't signed yet. For Smith, I feel like especially he's been kind of just been sitting there and he's the one outside of Max Domi, he's been the one shining star that Arizona's always had. He's always been a difficult goalie to beat, and he's always been, really passionate. Beat a lot of times, which is why I love when the Hawks play him. He freaks out, but he's finally going to a team that has much more potential as of right now. A stronger defensive core. With guys like Dougie Hamilton, and then you've got your forwards. Sean Monahan and Johnny Hockey and the rest of them. For Smith, I would be, really excited. I think he brings a lot to the table that potentially Elliott does not. People forget that Mike Smith went to a Western Conference final in 2012, which is not that far in the past. He has the potential, I think, to still do something like that. And now he's got a team that I don't even know how Phoenix made it that far that year, but he's got a team that can be more consistent in how they play and whether or not that they make the playoffs or not. I really want to see Calgary make the playoffs again and make it a nice dark horse kind of push. And I think they can do that with Mike Smith. So that's good for him. And, you know, I think with Elliott, I think we said he's early linked to Philly. Isn't that what you said, Nick? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a rumor that came out tonight. Free agents, before July 1st, they're given a window where you're allowed to meet with teams, but you're not supposedly allowed to talk about the terms of contracts. But it's not done. But there's some talk he could be going to Philly, which means maybe Steve Mason's going to Winnipeg or something like that. But yeah, so it sounds like Elliott's gone, and obviously Smith. They didn't trade for Smith to back up. He's the number one there.
Yeah, and that was kind of my point. I think Smith is a more voice in that than Brian Elliott is. There are a lot of goals that you can look at in that Anaheim series where it was kind of like, wow, Elliott, come on. Comes to mind, not to be too long-winded, but I think the Flames were up about 4-1. I can't remember which goal it was, but there was a goal that just should not have gone. It was like a dump-in puck, and it's just those things always seem to revolve around. Not necessarily saying that particular one was his fault, but I'm just saying these things sort of find their way to Brian Elliott. Bad luck for Brian Elliott. Sort of, it finds its way to him in the playoffs, and I think with Smith, a little bit more consistent and a little bit more dependable. So for the Flames, I would be excited with getting Mike Smith. And if I was Mike Smith, I'd be excited to be heading back up to Canada and playing with, obviously a much better team.
Yeah, you mentioned that that Calgary defensive group, they beefed it up big time with the Travis Hamonic trade. He was actually a pretty hot commodity. Pretty much as soon as the season ended, he was even in talks to go to Colorado in some sort of Matt Duchene trade. So to sign a guy like that, like you said, Dan, it definitely has Smith feeling a little more confident in the group he has in front of him. And just for the Flames in general, that should really help them, especially in a time like the playoffs. They have all the talent in the world at the forward position. Like you said, they got guys like Johnny Hockey, Monahan, Matthew Tkachuk, and then just to sort of beef up that defense, it's really going to help them maybe get over that hump that we saw. They kind of were stuck. They really had nothing going against the Ducks this year. So hopefully this can sort of turn things around, and maybe just after a year of failure in the playoffs, they sort of get the experience they need and can really make a run next year and for the coming years.
Are you guys surprised that Calgary decided to go after Mike Smith, but they didn't give up a similar package to get a guy like Fleury? Are you guys surprised that they took one over the other?
For me, I personally probably would have taken Smith over Fleury. I know Fleury's got the cup. Well, he's got two cups. One.
He's got three.
Three. Sorry. Where am I? What am I talking about? He's got three. One of which he did completely by himself. One of which Murray took him to, and then this past one, he played really well up until he got shellacked against the Senators. So I guess maybe I'm talking out of my ass, but I don't know. There's something always been about me and Mike and Fleury that I've just never really liked, and maybe it was that inconsistency between the 2009 playoffs and now. I just felt like he wasn't that good, that maybe he was on the downside of his career. So I think for Calgary, if I was looking at it, I think I probably would have gone with Mike Smith too. They're both pretty similar in age.
Fleury's actually 2 years younger.
He is younger. Okay, so I was going to say, if anything, Fleury is younger. So, well, maybe I am talking out of my ass, but I'll stick with Mike Smith. I'll stick with Smith.
Yeah, especially because when he was stuck with the Coyotes, so you really couldn't get a full judgment on how he plays when it counts. We did see him, like you said, go to a Western Conference final, but he has a pretty small sample size as far as I know in terms of playoff performance. So, and then, yeah, you get he is 2 years older, but I would have to agree with Dan. I feel like Mike Smith is a safer bet, especially with the inconsistency that we've seen from Fleury.
Yeah. So obviously, those trades went down, Shen, and then the Derek Steppen thing, I gave my 2 cents on that. It's kind of an interesting move there to give up one of your top prospects in the 7th overall pick for Stepan and give up a young signed, long-term signed defenseman for a guy like Hjalmarsson. If you've got Calgary who's on the rise, Edmonton's shooting to the moon, and San Jose's still solid, and you got LA, but those trades went down, but there were a few trades that didn't go down necessarily. I think most notably Duchesne. I know maybe this is a topic for Kevin, but your thoughts on Duchesne not getting traded. Do you think we see him get moved soon? Who do you think he's going to? I said last podcast I thought the Islanders should be aggressive for him and Eberle. They did wind up trading for Eberle for Ryan Strome 1-for-1. I think that was some really good value for the Islanders, I thought. That trade, Strome wasn't doing a whole hell of a lot for them, and maybe Strome's a guy who just needs a change of scenery. But I think that was good value for the Islanders. But, any thoughts on Duchesne? Sakic seems like he's being kind of stingy. So, what's going on there?
The thing is, I feel like no one really knows what's going on. There's been so many different rumored offers for Duchesne, but I feel like every single one gets refuted or turned down like a second later. You do get that sense that Joe Sakic is being a little too picky and greedy with Matt Duchesne.
I mean, he's been linked to so many teams now. I mean, he's been linked to?
He got linked to Nashville.
But they're not going to give up any of their D. I mean,
no. Well, that's what it got shut down because Nashville was like, yeah, we're not giving up any one of our defensemen.
Yeah, that top 4 is immovable. So, I think that's why maybe the Hamonic discussions were happening, because I think for many years Colorado is they've needed a pretty stout defenseman. Johnson and Barry are kind of loosey-goosey there. They're not really like true number 1 guys or anything like that. They just play a little too loose, and they're not responsible enough in their own end. They just need kind of like a bona fide top 2 defenseman, and that's why the Hamonic thing made sense. But I've heard Toronto linked to him, Nashville, the Islanders. I mean, is it going to reach a resolution? There's rumors that his agent's pissed that they didn't trade him, so be interesting to see where he winds up. But I don't know what's going on there with Duchesne, but that was a guy. I'm sitting there on draft night in the stands, and it wasn't a very, there's been some moves made. I mean, I just said, Eberle got moved, and we've covered all the other trades that have gone down. But the draft night, I'm sitting literally like 15 feet from the Colorado table, and I'm sitting there, and there's just nothing going on there at that table. And it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of urgency to move a guy like Duchesne. And I think with the year Colorado had and the forwards they have around him, you've got Landeskog, you got Rottinen, you've got McKinnon. I think, they need they need like a little bit of a kick in the ass. So Duchesne should get moved, but I mean, I don't know what defenseman is available out there that they trade him for. I mean, I'm trying to think of a team that's got like a surplus of defensemen. I'm looking at a team like Anaheim, but I don't think they really make sense. I don't think Vatanen for Duchesne's going to happen. I'm really interested to see how this thing reaches a resolution. I mean, I don't know, Kev, what do you think? Do you think New York could move a guy like DeHaan for him? Or, I mean, do you have any prediction on this?
They just extended DeHaan, I'm pretty sure, like maybe yesterday. So, I mean, that could really mean anything. That doesn't really say that they're not going to move him. But just sort of a general statement, I feel like it's such a mutually beneficial move to trade Duchesne because pretty much no matter who you trade him for, if Sakic knows what he's doing, which at this point we are really unsure about, but you'll get a great return. No matter what he's looking for. If he's looking for defense, you can definitely go out there and get that for Matt Duchesne. And I think Duchesne just needs to change his scenery. We've seen how good he is and how big of an impact he can have on the game, but we've never seen him. We've only seen they had that one good year fucking what year was it? But
the
when they
fluke
won
where
the
Minnesota
14.
beat them. Where Minnesota beat them.
Yeah.
2014.
So we've really only seen, a shell, so to speak, of what Duchesne could be if he were on a good team. So just it's such a mutually beneficial move to trade Duchesne, and it's pretty disappointing that it's quite possible that might not happen.
And I think I want to get to this real quick. I think we all need to have a good laugh about it. I think you guys know what trade I'm referring to toward the end of the draft night. That was you had heard Pittsburgh wanted to add some sandpaper, some grit, some toughness, all those fun hockey cliches about toughness. But Ryan Reeves going from St. Louis to Pittsburgh, I mean, guys, is that worth trading down 20 spots for a guy like that? I sure don't think so.
No.
Yeah, I agree.
I understand, teams wanting a little bit of grit and, like you said, all those cliches, edgy players, but with the not the chemistry, the culture, that's the word I was looking for, that Pittsburgh has, Reeves doesn't fit in that at all. Fast, skilled, puck possession, all these terms, that like the Hawks, you need skilled players, and yes, you can have your gritty, greasy guys, but even they have to have, Shaw and Bickle were two of our biggest, feisty, assholey kind of players. Hartman's kind of filled that role a little bit too, but at the end of the day, all three of those guys could score, if it was needed. Bickle had his tremendous year in 13, and Shaw was good in 15 and 13, and Hartman, as we've seen, has shown the potential kind of guy. I mean, the first shift he had, he blew up. I think it was Richard Zednik or something like that. Just absolutely ran him over. But he also has the talent to put the puck in the net, and Reeves does not. It just doesn't make sense to go for him. And then on top of it, the consequence of getting Reeves is dropping, that many spots down in the draft. So for me, it's one of those head scratchers, and it's just like, what exactly are you trying to go for here? So, I mean, to me, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and like you said, they're looking to add some grit, and people are saying, "Oh, now people are going to think twice about going after Crosby or Malkin." That's not worth trading a first-round pick for, and then especially when it's Reeves, someone who pretty much contributes nothing offensively. And we've seen the past 2 years, they're clearly fine without a guy like Reeves on the roster. So it's a really dumb move, in my opinion. Really, really, really dumb. Like, it almost angers me how dumb it is.
Yeah. Well, good for St. Louis. I mean, that's a good trade.
Yeah.
You can make the argument. I've seen both fan bases unhappy about it. Some people think, the Shen, they didn't give up enough value. Some think it's kind of overpayment. I haven't really seen like a consensus on the Braden Shen trade, but, a lot of people think, I don't know. It's just kind of like up in the air how that trade's going to go. So we'll see how that goes. But I think St. Louis gets a guy who plays with an edge, but obviously is world class in comparison to Reeves, Braden Shen, that is. Compared to Ryan Reeves, I mean, the guy is offensive, but he looks like frickin' Wayne Gretzky compared to Ryan Reeves. So, that's a interesting move there. But moving on to free agency, I was just wondering if you guys have any sort of bold predictions or any thoughts on anything that's gone on so far. We'll maybe wrap up with the McDavid talks because that's not quite done yet. And Draisaitl, who's the restricted free agent. So they're looking at a combined cap hit of well north of $20 million combined. So that's something we'll finish up with. But TJ Oshie got locked up for 8 years, I think. He had 33 goals last year for Washington. He's a really good player, but I think that contract's going to be a little rough at the end. But good for Washington for keeping him. Justin Williams apparently is not returning to the Capitals, which is interesting because you'd think that guy is trying to go get his 4th cup at this point in his career, but he doesn't feel like Washington's the place to do it. Apparently, he's got 3 or 4 teams left. Shattenkirk, the 2 names he's connected most with are the Rangers and the Devils. Devils are obviously trying to invigorate their roster with, Taylor Hall acquisition last year and, drafting Nico first overall this past Friday. So they're trying to generate some excitement there. Joe Thornton's a guy who's going to be available. Carl Alsner potentially available. Just to kind of get to the point here. Just, do you guys have any bold predictions or thoughts on the Oshie signing or any of the rumors out there, or, as far as free agency goes?
I would say it's just been disappointing. I feel like the names that going into the offseason, the names that we were pretty much told by the media that we're going to move haven't been moved. The one being Duchesne and the other being Alex Galchenyuk, which I'm personally very disappointed with. I would love to see him in a Hawks sweater, but it's just like I said, for the most part, teams are just really, really hesitant to cough up what these teams are asking for. Like, for example, I think Bergevin wants 2 NHL-ready defensemen for Galchenyuk, which is I would think it's a pretty high asking price, no matter how young Galchenyuk is and, how much potential he has. So, yeah, I'll just say that it's been pretty disappointing. I know it's very early and free agency starts tomorrow, I guess, is when this will be posted. But, yeah, pretty disappointed.
Yeah, same. It's been, like you said, Kevin, kind of quiet. And we've got, obviously July 1st is looming around the corner. But I think for me, the Capitals' interest the most with Oshie re-signing because it seemed as though that he wasn't going to re-sign, or at least to me it looked as though he wasn't going to re-sign, and then he did. Justin Williams, like we said, he said he's not coming back. The 4 teams and the Caps aren't one of them. So to me, that's interesting because you re-sign a guy who's got a lot of skill and talent, but you also lose a guy that carries the nickname Mr. Game 7, although I don't think he scored in Game 7 against Pittsburgh. Not to bring up bad memories for us Hawks fans, but he's a killer in that Game 7 against LA in 2014, and he's done it to numerous teams over the years. So whoever picks him up, that's a solid, kind of second or third liner, depending on what team he's on to pick up. So, I'll be interested to see where he goes. The Caps were the team to kind of watch out for. And then I think we also mentioned Dan Girardi as a possibility that we could sign him for real cheap.
I think he's going to Tampa. That's kind of I think he's going to go.
Say that again?
I heard he might be going to Tampa here. So
Tampa, okay.
Yeah.
To me, he's an interesting guy regardless.
He's sick in the head. He just eats pucks. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. That's what I mean. I mean, I know Jarmelson blocked shots, but Dan Girardi is kind of the guy I think of first in terms of just, reckless abandon with his body and not really giving a shit about anything other than making sure that puck doesn't get to Lundqvist or, whoever's in net for them. So it'll be interesting to see where he moves as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping things pick up here because, like we're saying, it's been kind of ho hum as of right now.
Yeah, hopefully someone picks up Jagger too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you see his Twitter? It's going nuts.
Oh yeah.
He's an absolute riot. Oh my gosh, I love.
Yeah, he said there's rumors going around or something along the lines of there's getting linked to 10 to 12 teams, but I've gotten no calls. I'm trying to call that. Yeah, I think my bold prediction, I'm going to say Joe Thornton leaves San Jose. I think
that's pretty fair. I can see that.
I don't know about bold. I think he's going to sign with a different contender. I think he likes being out there. He's been there forever now.
He's been linked to Nashville as of
I was going to say,
most recent thing I've heard.
I think my kind of bold one, I could see Bonino going to Edmonton. I could see it. I think Thornton could go to a team like Nashville. And then I think my other prediction is I think the Leafs are going to get a defenseman. Somehow, they're either going to try to trade for a guy like Sami Vatanen, or they're going to pay Carl Alsner a bunch of money. They're going to definitely add a defenseman. I think those are kind of like my 3 picks there. This is just not really an exciting free agent class, and when the trades aren't that active, I mean, you'd think Vegas would have made more trades now where, they flipped a few more of the guys they've drafted. They've only flipped Trevor Van Riemsdyk to Carolina and Mark Mathot to Dallas. It's just really not an exciting free agent class. I mean, Bonino's interesting, Alsner. I mean, if Thornton and Marlowe leave San Jose, I mean, they're at the end of their careers, but that's still kind of interesting. Because they would obviously be going for one last run at the Cup. Same thing here with, Justin Williams. The Shattenkirk sweepstakes looks like he's going out east. I mean, it's pretty much a lock. He's either going to go to the Rangers or the Devils. So, I just think if Thornton or Marlowe stay in San Jose, it's going to be one of the more boring July 1st in recent memory. But one thing I wanted to bring up for those at home, a lot of teams, just some speculation on my behalf, as far as big money being thrown around, I think a lot of teams with the uncertainty with the salary cap and the Canadian dollar, and maybe not necessarily wanting to blow a bunch of money in free agency, is that let me tell you guys a little bit about the 2019 free agent class on the blue line. So obviously before then, some of these guys are probably going to get re-signed, but let me just name some of the unrestricted free agents for 2019 on the blue line. Drew Doughty, Erik Karlsson, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Tyler Myers, Alexander Edler, Ryan McDonough, Nicholas Hjalmarsson, and Ryan Ellis.
Oh my God!
Wow.
All those guys are all unrestricted free agents in 2019. So
That's bananas.
if you're a team like Toronto, which I just said, I think they're going to go get a defenseman. Do you blow a bunch of money on Carl Alsner, or you try to get a guy like Vatanen, or are you going to roll the dice and say, hey, maybe we can get Drew Doughty back up to good old Ontario here or something? So, I mean,
Absolutely.
that's maybe – I don't want to start the Drew Doughty to Toronto stuff 2 years in advance, but it's already going to be horrible with Tavares. If Tavares doesn't sign soon, it's going to get bad with Tavares getting linked to Toronto. But, it's just one of those things where I think, Toronto, they're kind of ahead of schedule. Everyone expects them to improve this year, but it's not necessarily, for teams like Pittsburgh and Chicago, it's kind of like cup or bust. Washington, too, I'll throw them in that category. But for Toronto, it's not necessarily cup or bust. So all I'm saying is, even though they might have a few glaring needs, even with all the young talent they have, they might not necessarily spend the money yet because of, some of the guys who are going to be available in the next classes, which are a lot more exciting than this year.
Yeah.
So speaking of money getting tossed around, Connor McDavid, guys, and Draisaitl, that's going to be wow. I don't even know what to say. They're worth it, but what's the rumor, Kevin, here? 13 plus for McDavid?
13 and a quarter for McDavid.
Possibly up to 9 for Draisaitl?
Yeah.
And for reference, Kane and Taves are 10.5 times 2, so they're 21. So 13 and 9 is 22 plus there. So, and we've seen the problems that the Blackhawks have had with the salary cap. So, it's McDavid's a world-class player. First full year in the league, he's got 100 points. The guy's unbelievable. He's worth every penny, but it definitely hinders flexibility.
Yeah, especially with Chiarelli saying he would match any offer sheet for Draisaitl. I almost kind of want to see some team just maybe call his bluff on that. Maybe just offer him a shit ton of money.
Yeah, but it's going to cost him 4 first-round picks. If you're a contender, that might be
that's right.
Because, if it's over a certain threshold, you got to give up your next – you got to, pretty much forfeit the first round. But, yeah, that would be interesting, right? I think that's kind of why the Hawks traded Saad a couple years ago, was the fear of an offer sheet, and they kind of just,
Yeah.
So, we'll see how real it is. Yeah, I think this is the first time we haven't had an offer sheet since Ryan O'Reilly. I think is the last offer sheet.
Jeez.
Yeah, I think the last
Wow.
two were Shea Weber and Ryan O'Reilly. You guys might need to fact check me, but with the whole debacle with O'Reilly going to the Flames or not, obviously, when he was with Colorado before he got traded, to Buffalo, and then Shea Weber signing for 14 years in Philly, and ultimately Nashville decided to take him back instead of getting 4 first-rounders. So, I think it's the best chance we've had in a while, but I still don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I doubt it. Going back to what you said about Toronto, I wanted to mention this. I feel like they're better off waiting until next offseason with such a loaded free agent class. I feel like Toronto is a pretty desirable location to be, especially with such an exciting group that they're building there, and to be in a place like Toronto.
Yeah, but how bad's the media? I mean, is the media? You hear rumors of it. You hear the whispers of it.
Yeah,
Phil Kessel knows all about that.
Yeah, Kessel. I was just about to say Kessel and them just butted heads all the time. But yeah, Kevin, I agree with you. I think it's not, especially when you look when you list off the names like Nick just did. To me, you gamble because I think, and I don't even think it's necessarily that big of a gamble. When you look at what they did, I don't think really anybody anticipated, maybe there were some people that thought they'd make the playoffs, but I would, maybe some people were like, I don't know if they're going to be able to do it even with all that talent. And then they got there and I picked the Capitals to win, but I thought that Toronto would give them a run for their money, and they did. And I don't think a lot of people, expected that out of them. And if that's their kind of what they're working off, what Babcock is working off now, that amount of speed and skill and talent, then they can afford. I think they can afford to wait a year and pick up somebody like Carlson or Doughty or McDonough or whoever else.
I'll be amazed if all 3 of them make it, but if Doughty does, holy cow!
No, I just mean it. I don't mean.
I think Doughty's got the best chance.
I just mean take their pick. I mean, they've got, like you said, they can take their pick and do what they want, especially if they've got some room, some cap space. So,
yeah. Speaking of cap space, especially with this weak free agent class, it sucks for Vegas because they have a ton of cap room and they really have nothing worth spending it on.
I mean, they're paying Coyote legends David Clarkson and Pavel Datsyuk, right?
Love it.
Wow.
I mean, going to the Doughty thing in 2019, you look at Brent Burns getting an 8-year deal at age 32 for $8 million a year. What's a 29-year-old Doughty going to get? I mean, 29-year-old Doughty, I mean, he's going to get paid. I mean, we're talking 10. I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking double digits, I feel like. He'll
cash in.
It also could depend what maybe I don't know. I was going to say maybe what Carlson gets if he
True.
The thing is if he gets an extension in Ottawa, I feel like that's really hard to sort of serve as a benchmark for what Doughty could get, but who knows? Yeah.
Any predictions though, boys, for 2017 though? Thornton, Bonino, Marlowe potentially, Justin Williams, Shattenkirk, anybody, just any Alsner. You guys have any picks you're feeling confident about, or do you think it's kind of up in the air?
I think it's all up in the air. At least on my end of things. I'm trying to think.
It feels like you can honestly narrow it down to a few destinations, but it's hard to really pick one.
Yeah. Well, and then I was just going to be bold and say that Thornton, like you were saying, Thornton might not be a Shark. That would be bold, just because he spent his whole damn career there. But yeah, I don't think I can really, predict one way or the other. I think it's too up in the air as of right now.
Yeah, hopefully the Hawks address that's sort of a replacement for Panarin. Like you said at the beginning, Nick, they've been linked to Sam Gagner, which would be a pretty
4th line winger, 1st line power play. I'm in. I'm in for about $1 million. I'm in for $1 million. That's about it.
Yeah, my max was 2.5 per.
Man. I don't know. I feel like
that's pretty generous, but
here we go down the Blackhawks rabbit hole again. But
Mhm.
I feel like go get a low risk, high reward guy to play with Kane. Worst case, you try to get somebody at the deadline. But I think any free money they have, I'm optimistic about Connor Murphy, but put it in the defense. I mean, seriously. I mean, I'd rather give a defenseman a few extra million than a forward. I mean, I really would. I mean, they've got plenty of pieces up front. I mean, especially if you think DeBrincat can come in at some point in the year and Schmaltz and Hartman can take a step. I mean, you got to do something to that defense because, Kepney, Rudda, kind of question marks, Murphy, they're confident in him. I'll trust the front office, but, we don't know what's going to happen there. But, yeah, we'll be there. We'll be live tweeting everything off the Go With The Flow Twitter account, and you guys can follow that at home at GWTF Podcast, at GWTF Podcast. We'll be sitting there this July 4th weekend in the early morning on our laptops or phones or what have you, and kind of following the movement and seeing what goes down. Fellas, anything else before we call it quits for our June 30th episode?
No, I think that's it.
yeah, I think we got everything.
All right. Thanks for joining me, guys. Everybody at home, have a happy July 4th. And, we'll see what we do with the podcast scheduling here. I mean, obviously, after free agency kind of goes down, we've made it through the expansion draft. We made it through the entry draft. We're going to make it through most of the trade windows and, obviously the unrestricted free agency. So, not a whole lot of talk about between July 1st and training camp. So we might have to take a elongated hiatus. But, as long as relevant stuff's coming out, we'll try to pump out some more content for you. And, as always, even if we aren't doing the podcast, we'll still be blogging and doing some Twitter stuff and getting some content out there as much as we can stir up for you guys at home. So thanks for joining, fellas. Thanks again, and take it easy.
Happy 4th, everybody. Peace out.
Until next time.